the
Maybe you
gloves
can
on
share
and the
that
mask on and
Instagram
the
account
face
with us
shield on and
sometime.
like scrubbing the
Yeah,
groceries
I'll
in the
send it
lawn
over.
with bleach.
Hey, Lola, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So tell me where you are physically right now, because in the Zoom world where everybody's somewhere, where are you?
I'm currently at the Marshall School of Business in USC in a breakout room.
I know, but you're going to have to tell me what USC is.
The University of Southern California,
All right, cool.
in Los
So
Angeles.
excellent. So somehow you got there, and what we're going to talk about is who you were before the COVID lockdown and during the COVID lockdown, and then, well, we already know where you are, but you're going to tell that story. So where were you before we heard about COVID?
So yeah, I grew up in a small town in Mexico called San Miguel. It's kind of the heart of Mexico, known for preserving the, tradition and culture of Mexico. So it's this beautiful little town in the middle of Mexico where I grew up, called San Miguel de Allende.
Right. And you
So that's
are, so you're a bilingual. You grew up, you're an American who grew up in Mexico?
Yeah, so my parents, I was born in Boston, but my parents moved to Mexico when I was two. So I, had all my school there and all my friends, that's home. When I go back home, I go back to Mexico. So that's where I grew up.
Okay. So how did, tell me a little bit about your COVID story, the lockdown. How'd that go?
So yeah, I remember I was with some friends the first time that, well, no, I remember seeing, thinking back, yeah, I remember hearing about the pandemic on the news, in China, and it's starting to spread in Europe, but it was never something that I thought was gonna spread to Mexico or the States. Like it wasn't. And so I remember being with some friends and I was talking with someone in Europe whose school had just gotten shut down because of the pandemic. So they were starting to quarantine. And I remember thinking, like, that's so crazy. But that's not something that we would have to do here. That's so far away. And then, yeah, it was very fast. I remember there was like 14 cases in Mexico. They were growing very slowly. And then, we had this long weekend, and they said, okay, on Sunday or on Monday, when we were supposed to go back the next day, they said, actually, you're not coming back. We're going to take a 2-week break for quarantine because of the pandemic. And I never went back to school. And that was my junior year of high school. So I did practically 2 years of online.
Well, wait a minute, wait a minute. So one day the school says you're not coming back to school, and in your junior of high school, you stopped going to school and you never went back to your school?
Yeah, no, I only went back for graduation, which was like the very last day to take photos with, everyone had their masks on. But yeah, that was the last time.
So
Yeah.
no prom, right?
Well, we don't have prom in Mexico anyway,
Okay.
but yeah, no prom,
Okay.
no anything. Yeah,
All
it
right.
was all online.
And how did students, how did teenagers at this point handle all of a sudden being told that there's a pandemic and that you can't go to school and, theoretically you can't see your friends? How did people handle that?
Well, the school was very weird. I think the teachers, there was like a big, like at that point, I had never even heard of Zoom. And it's so funny now, it's like such a big part of everyone's life. There's been a lot of changes since the pandemic. Zoom is very integrated, but I had never even heard of Zoom. Neither had my classmates and neither had the teachers. And so it was really hard to make that transition because it was also so sudden and abrupt. So, we had teachers that would like someone made a test on Kahoot, and instead of sending us the link, they accidentally sent the link to the answers, so it was like it was a big adjustment period. Also like people would figure out how to like freeze their screens, so it looked like they were there, but they wouldn't be in front of the camera, like so, stuff like that. But yeah, I think I was really scared. I didn't leave. I didn't for like the 2 months. I think I was like really in lockdown. Going to the grocery store with the gloves on and the mask on and the face shield on and like scrubbing the groceries in the lawn with bleach before. I remember my tennis teacher. I was still doing like tennis classes at that point, and my tennis teacher was like drinking bleach, like diluted bleach, and I was like, but yeah, people were really scared of it. They were taking it really seriously.
So,
The
so
lockdown that was taken very seriously at the time.
that teacher listened to President Trump
Yeah,
about
I was
drinking
gonna
bleach.
say. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And all right. So the thing that I'm curious about is, did students, again, students slash teenagers, did they obey the rules? I mean, we're
I
talking people
think
16, 17. Were they obeying?
well, I was for the first 2 months, I didn't see anyone. There were some people, however, who would go out, and there was actually, yeah, this reminds me, there was this Instagram page called Covidiotas. That means like it's kind of a mesh of the word COVID and idiots. And so if people went out during that lockdown, they would get exposed on that page. So like if you wanted to expose someone, you could take a screenshot of their story or whatever, and then the page would like post it. And so there was like a collection of, and you see people that you knew, like, oh my God. And yeah, I remember seeing like, what is this person like doing, like spreading, super spreader. But yeah, so there's one of those Instagram pages, which was, and there was in all cities, I think there's like many cities that have that Instagram page, Go Dietas. So during the, yeah, there was always people, people who wouldn't respect it. I started to go out a little bit more after 2 months. But like the bar and like bars and like nightlife in town was shut down completely for like, I think it was like a year, and then also had very strict restrictions afterwards after a year.
Yeah, I
So like the
remember
life totally changed.
it was it was sort of difficult to drink with a mask on, right?
Yeah.
All right. So were you exposed, so to speak? I know that's interesting question. Were you
I
were you on Instagram?
Oh, I think I was on Instagram at one point, but it was like 3 months later, 4 months later, when it was kind of starting to die down a little bit. But I think I did make one appearance on
Okay.
the Instagram page, unfortunately.
All right. So somehow, let's just talk about, how you kind of edged into transition. So at some point in time, you're saying, I want to go to college in the United States, right? That had been a plan.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did how was that affected? How was the college application system, which is hard enough to try to get into an American college or a USA
hmm
college from Mexico? What did you have to do to make that happen?
Well, yeah, that was a big, like, I mean, obviously, as you probably know, there's not the kind of college culture in Mexico that there is in the US, so I was the only person in my school at that point who was applying to colleges in the States.
Hmm.
I didn't know, I wasn't aware of like a lot of the colleges. Like I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to study either. So I was kind of also planning on going to visit colleges in the States, doing college tours to kind of see and learn more. And I completely missed out on all of that. I had to do virtual college tours. But so it was hard kind of applying and being so far removed from that college culture in the US for my whole life. And then kind of having to blindly apply to these places that I hadn't
Right.
gotten a feel for in person. But I think a lot of people were in that situation of not being able to tour college campuses, but at least, I guess people in the States have more knowledge of those colleges anyway. But
Okay.
yeah, and then for example, my SATs, like I didn't have to take those. Well, I couldn't actually. I'd been studying for like 6 months, but I couldn't take them because the places in Mexico where you would go to take them were closed down because of the lockdown. So they made those optional, which probably benefited me. I don't know if I would have gotten a super high score on the SATs, or at least a score that would have made my application more competitive. But I think it was difficult having to come to college in the States after doing 2 years of online high school in Mexico. That's what really got me, I think. Yeah.
No, so here's a question. There was a movie a couple of years ago about parents in the United States, wealthy people paying lots of money to try to get
Yeah.
their children into University of Southern California, and it was famous. There were a couple of movie stars, and I've been one that went to jail, and they faked their kids being water polo players, right? They just
Yeah.
photoshopped their face onto the kid in the pool. How do you think, like, so your issue was you're living in Mexico, you can't visit the school, you can't talk to people in person, you're not doing your SATs, you're on lockdown. How do you why do you think University of Southern California, which by the way is a school I probably couldn't have gotten into, what what worked?
I think that um I don't know, honestly. I mean, I had a unique background of growing up in Mexico, and I also studied abroad in Spain. And I kind of was interested in going at that point into international relations, and I had some work experience that it kind
Right.
of all made sense. And so I had a lot of time to sit down and work on those written applications. And then I got like I had, good grades in high school, and so that definitely helped. So I think that the good grades in high school were what made up for the fact that I had no SAT scores, that I didn't take that test.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's like a very random, college applications can be very random.
Right.
So I just got lucky. I don't know.
Okay. How's it going now? Do you wear masks anymore?
No, but well, yeah, it's no, not really. Some of my teachers have had COVID over the semester.
Hmm.
So that's something. But when we first got to college, we had these thing called Trojan checks where you'd have to have a QR, like you have to get tested every week for COVID. And then you'd get a QR code if you passed the test. And then before leaving like the dorm, you had to show the person your QR code. And if you
Right.
tested negative, they would send you off to the USC hotel where you would have to quarantine until you
Really?
tested negative. Yeah,
Well, I have to say, maybe for the audience, just to mention that the USC Trojans, which is what your
their
football
mascot.
team, sports teams are called, you weren't referring to and dare I say this, I'm just going to say it, a condom. There was no condom
No,
test. All right.
no.
Okay. All right. That's a little crazy. Just had to get it out there because, there are going to be international people watching this video. They may not know.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh
And
yeah.
so last question, you went through this whole experience, any major takeaway or just life just goes on?
Life goes on, but it's kind of weird because it's like this, we're back into this abnormal, back to abnormality because things aren't the way that they used to be. I think there's a silver lining though, I think I started to, you know, understand the importance of spending alone time and spending time with your family as well and
Hmm.
prioritize health, which I think is something that most people took away after the pandemic. Um, and yeah, so I think there's a silver lining. I think there's a lot of benefits too, like Zoom, for example. We might not even be having this conversation if it weren't for,
Right.
how much Zoom grew during the pandemic.
All right, cool.
Remote work too is something that, grew so much since the pandemic.
Right. Well, I know it
Yeah.
affected students. It affected students who want to go to an office and be an intern. That's a problem. And
Mhm.
I'm aware of the fact that you managed to pull that off in New York a little bit.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was a major effect to people in trying to get through their education system, but I want to
Yeah.
congratulate you.
Thank you.
And hey, thanks for your time. All right.
No, thank you, Peter.
All right,
It's
cool.
good
All
to
right.
talk to you.
Ciao.